His side of the closet was still open when I heard the elevator stop on our floor. Darius never left it like that. He was the kind of man who lined his shoes against the wall so neatly they looked staged, who rinsed his coffee mug before the steam even faded, who came home humming half a song under his breath while dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. That night, the apartment felt wrong before I knew why. The lamp over the kitchen counter threw a weak amber circle across the quartz. The dishwasher gave off its low mechanical hum, and the air smelled faintly like basil from the pasta I'd made for two. His plate was still warm in the oven. My phone sat face up beside the sink, our last text thread open, my message from 40 minutes earlier still unread. "You good? Need me to save you dinner?" I walked past the living room and stopped in front of his bedroom. The door was cracked 3 inches. A strip of cold blue light from the window cut across the floorboards and caught on the edge of an empty hanger swaying inside his closet. He'd changed shirts 3 times before dates. I knew because he always stepped out and asked, "Too much?" Like I was neutral territory, like my opinion was safe because I was just Malik, the roommate who split rent on time and kept the Wi-Fi working and never, ever said the one thing that would ruin everything. I pushed his door wider with 2 fingers. The bed was made. His watch was gone from the dresser. So was the bottle of cologne he only used when he wanted to impress someone. I stood there listening to the old radiator click behind the wall and the distant bark of a dog somewhere down on the street, and for no good reason my chest tightened. Darius had been seeing someone for 2 months, a woman from work with perfect eyeliner and a laugh too bright for the quiet corners he liked. He'd told me about her over takeout cartons and late-night sports reruns, grinning into his beer while I picked labels off the bottle and acted like I was hearing a weather report. Straight men tell you things when they think your silence means ease. I had gotten very good at silence. There were rules in our apartment, spoken and unspoken. He stole my fries. I mocked his playlists. We watched bad horror movies from opposite ends of the couch, and when he fell asleep there sometimes, his head tipped toward my shoulder but never quite touched. I dated almost no one, which he called tragic. He dated enough for both of us. I cooked when he worked late. He fixed anything in the place that squeaked, leaked, or flickered. We lived inside a kind of careful warmth. It had edges. I heard keys rattle outside, then missed the lock once before catching. The door opened hard enough to hit the stopper. Darius came in with the smell of night air and car exhaust clinging to his jacket. His hair, usually pushed back, had fallen over his forehead. One side of his collar was folded under. He didn't look at me. He dropped his keys, not into the bowl, but onto the wood floor, where they hit with a sharp metallic crack that made both of us flinch. "Hey," I said. It came out softer than I meant it to. He stood there with one hand still on the doorknob, breathing through his mouth. His eyes were red around the rims, not glossy, not dramatic, just scraped raw like he'd been staring into wind. There was a smear of something dark on his cuff, maybe dirt from bracing himself against a wall outside. He gave a short laugh with no sound in it, and dragged a hand over his face. "You made dinner?" "Yeah." I stepped toward the kitchen. "I can heat it up." "Don't." He shrugged out of his jacket and nearly missed the hook by the door. I caught the sleeve before it slipped to the floor. The fabric was cold. Underneath, his t-shirt was creased like he'd been gripping it in his fists. He finally looked at me then, and whatever usually kept him polished had split clean through. "She dumped me," he said. No build-up. No joke first. Just the words dropped between us, heavy and plain. The refrigerator motor kicked on. Somewhere in the hallway outside, someone laughed as they passed, and the sound felt impossibly far away. I opened my mouth to say something useful, but he was already moving past me, not toward his room, not toward the shower, just into the middle of the apartment, as if he'd forgotten where anything belonged. He stopped by the couch and pressed both hands to the back of it, head down. The muscles in his arms locked under the thin cotton of his shirt. "Darius," I said, and this time I stepped close enough to see the tremor in his fingers. He let out a breath that shook on the way down. "Can you just?" He swallowed and looked over at me, helpless in a way I had never seen on him before. "Can you just stay here a second?" I crossed the room before he could take his hands off the couch and pretend he was fine again. The leather under my palm was cool when I set the bowl of keys on the console and turned him gently by the elbow. Up close, I could smell rain that never quite fell, the stale trace of restaurant air in his jacket, and the sharp bite of mint from gum he must have chewed to keep himself together on the drive back. "Sit down," I said. He gave me a look like he might argue, then didn't. That was new. Darius usually had a joke ready, some crooked grin to keep anything from getting too real. Tonight he folded onto the couch like his bones had gone loose. I pulled the throw blanket off the armrest and dropped it beside him, then went to the kitchen and killed the oven light. The little domestic things suddenly felt too loud. The clink of a plate, the hiss of the burner as I set a kettle on it, the cabinet door knocking softly when I reached for the mug he always stole from me because it was bigger. "Tea?" I asked. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. "Whatever," he muttered. Steam began to tick against the kettle lid. I opened the freezer, grabbed the half-melted pint of vanilla wheat abandoned 2 nights ago, and set it on the counter beside 2 spoons. When I brought both over, he looked at the ice cream first, and a tired breath escaped him that was almost a laugh. "That bad, huh?" "This is Triave," I said. "Tea means dignity. Ice cream means structural damage." His mouth twitched. It vanished fast, but I saw it. I sat in the chair across from him instead of next to him. Not because I wanted the distance. Because I knew exactly how little it would take tonight for me to forget what I was supposed to be to him. He took the mug with both hands. Heat fogged the lower half of his face. "She said I was hard to read," he said after a while. Then she said maybe that meant I wasn't really in it. The radiator clicked twice. Outside the window, a siren rose and faded into the city noise. I scraped 1 spoon through the soft ice cream and kept my eyes on the carton. "Were you?" He didn't answer right away. I heard the ceramic tap once against his teeth when he took a sip. I thought I was doing everything right. He stared at the dark TV screen across from us, using it like a mirror he didn't have to trust. Dinner dates. Texting back. Remembering details. I even met her friends. "That sounds exhausting," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me then, and for 1 second there was something almost offended in his face. Then he barked out a real laugh, rough and short. "You're a terrible person. I'm making you tea at 10:30 on a Thursday. And insulting my failed relationship in my hour of need. Both things can be true." The laugh left him softer. He dragged a hand through his hair and leaned back. The lamp pooled gold over one side of his face, leaving the other in shadow. "She said being with me felt lonely," he said quietly. That landed somewhere behind my ribs. Not because of her. Because I knew the shape of his loneliness better than anyone. I knew the way he stood at the fridge after midnight pretending to browse when he really just didn't want to go to bed yet. I knew he hated silence when it came from another person, but needed it when it came from himself. I knew when his shoulders started aching because he rubbed the same spot after long days. I knew too much. "She was wrong," I said, and he looked down at the mug as if the steam had become more interesting than my face. "Was she?" he asked. He sounded honestly unsure. That did something dangerous to me. So I stood up. Motion helped. I took his abandoned jacket from the hook, shook it out, and found his phone in the pocket. The screen was black, but the case had a fresh crack along one corner. "Did you drop this?" I asked. "Yeah." "Okay." I set it on the coffee table, then disappeared into the hall closet and came back with the old first aid tin we kept for headaches and cut fingers and winter colds. He lifted a brow. "I'm not bleeding. Your hand is." He looked down as if noticing it for the first time. A thin line crossed his knuckle, dried dark now, probably from scraping brick or asphalt or gripping something too hard. I sat on the edge of the coffee table and held out a cotton pad. "Give me your hand." He hesitated, then put it in mine. His skin was colder than I expected. The cut was small. The problem was that he didn't pull away. The apartment had gone so quiet, I could hear the faint buzz of the lamp and the kettle cooling in the kitchen. I cleaned the scrape and wrapped a bandage over his knuckle while he watched my hands like they were doing something far more complicated than first aid. "Malik," he said. I looked up. His eyes were tired and open in a way that made me wish I were a different man, a safer one. "Don't go to bed yet." So I didn't. I grabbed the remote, muted the apartment by turning on the TV and scrolling aimlessly until some black and white detective movie filled the room with trumpet music and grainy shadows. Darius hated old movies. He said everyone in them sounded like they were flirting or threatening each other, sometimes both. Tonight, he didn't complain. He shifted sideways on the couch, blanket dragged over one leg, mug balanced on his thigh, and I took the opposite end with a full cushion between us like that piece of upholstery still meant anything. The room had settled into after-midnight stillness, warm at the ceiling, cooler near the windows, with the lemon scent of dish soap drifting from the kitchen and the soft rattle of the vent every few minutes. Darius watched maybe 30 seconds of the movie before speaking. "Did she ever come over when I wasn't here?" he asked. "Who? Lena?" I looked at him. "No." He nodded once, eyes still on the screen, as if some private equation had balanced badly. "She said there was always someone else in the room with us." That made me sit a little straighter. "Meaning?" His thumb worried the edge of the blanket. "Meaning you." The trumpet music on the TV blared into a scene change. On screen, a woman in pearls slapped somebody under a street lamp. In our living room, nobody moved. I could hear Darius breathing through his nose, controlled, deliberate, the way people do when they're trying not to say the wrong thing next. "She thought I talked about you too much," he said. I told her that was ridiculous. I set the remote down on the coffee table with more care than it needed. "Was it?" He turned then, finally facing me instead of the screen. The lamplight caught in his eyes, gold at the edges, tired in the middle. "I don't know." He looked almost annoyed by his own answer. "That's the problem. I don't know what I'm supposed to know." My laugh came out quiet and dry. "That's not exactly a niche problem. You know what I mean." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees, the bandage on his knuckle bright against his skin. "I came home tonight, and the first thing I wanted was this. Not to call someone. Not to go out. Just," he gestured around the apartment, at the movie neither of us was watching, at me in the corner of the couch I had chosen on purpose. "This." I felt my pulse jump in my throat, ugly and immediate. So I did what I always did when things got too close to the truth. I made it practical. "You wanted somewhere safe." He let out a breath and dropped his head back. "Maybe." The word sat there, unfinished. I stood before it could grow teeth. "You should eat something." "Malik." "I mean it." I was already in the kitchen, pulling the pasta from the oven, spooning it onto a plate because my hands needed a job. The sauce had thickened at the edges. The fork clinked too loudly against the ceramic. Behind me, the couch cushions shifted. I thought he had let it go until I heard his footsteps on the hardwood. He stopped in the doorway to the kitchen, close enough that I could feel his body heat at my back even before his reflection appeared in the microwave door. "You always do that," he said. I kept my eyes on the plate. "Do what?" "Move." His voice wasn't sharp. That would have been easier. It was low and worn out and precise. Whenever something starts sounding too real, you go wash a dish or fix a lamp or make food like the right task can save you from the wrong conversation. I set the fork down. Slowly. The kitchen light was brighter than the living room lamp, too honest on stainless steel and white cabinets and my own face in the dark window over the sink. "You're the one who got dumped tonight," I said. "I'm trying to take care of you." "I know." He stepped around the island until he was in front of me. Not touching, not crowding, just there, impossible to ignore. "And I'm letting you. More than I let anybody." I folded my arms, not defensive, just to keep them from reaching for him. "Darius." "No, listen." He swallowed, gaze dropping briefly to the counter before lifting back to mine. "I don't know what this means yet. I'm not asking you to explain it for me. But when you keep acting like none of this matters, it makes me feel crazier than Lena did." That hit clean, because I had been acting like that, pretending this was ordinary, pretending I could keep him warm and steady and untouched by what it cost me. The pasta cooled between us, steam fading into the bright kitchen air. I picked up the plate, set it in front of him, and made a choice that felt smaller than it was. "Then eat," I said, my voice rougher now, "and I'll stop pretending." He stared at me for a long second, then took the plate from the counter. "Okay," he said. It was barely above a whisper, but it changed the whole room. The apartment sounded different after that. The refrigerator hummed too loud, a faucet somewhere in the building knocked twice in the wall, and the kitchen light threw a pale gold sheen across the cooling plate between us. Darius took another bite because I had told him to, because I had finally said the one thing I'd never let myself say plainly, and for a minute all I could hear was the scrape of his fork against ceramic and my own pulse thudding in my ears. Then he set the fork down. Not hard, just enough to make me look up. "Come sit down," he said. I stayed where I was, fingers braced on the edge of the counter, dish towel still twisted in one hand. He watched me like he'd already figured out the exact second I might bolt. "Malik." My name landed low and careful in the bright room. "You said you'd stop pretending." The towel slipped through my palm. I crossed the kitchen and took the chair beside him instead of the one across, close enough to feel the heat coming off his shoulder through both our shirts. Tomato and garlic still hung in the air. His scraped knuckle rested near mine on the table, pink at the edge where the skin had broken. "There," I said, but the word came out thin. He looked at the plate, then at me. "When Ryan ended it," he said, voice rough from too little sleep and too much talking. He said the lonely part wasn't just me being distracted. He said every room I was in already had someone else in it. I didn't move. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement 3 floors below. Darius dragged his thumb over the condensation on his water glass and didn't look away this time. "I think he meant you." A laugh almost escaped me. The wrong kind, sharp enough to cut. "That's not exactly news." "No," he said. "It isn't." He pushed the plate back an inch and stood up so suddenly the chair legs rasped against the floor. For one bad second I thought that was it, that I had pushed too far, but he only reached for my hand. His palm was warm, slightly damp, shaking just enough to make the bones in his wrist stand out. "Come here." He led me down the short hallway with the kitchen light at our backs and the apartment dim ahead of us. Only the lamp in the living room left on, throwing amber light over the couch and the stack of unopened mail on the side table. He didn't stop there. He kept going to his room, where the blinds were half open and city light striped the bed in silver bars. A t-shirt lay crumpled on the floor. His phone was face down on the dresser where he'd abandoned it hours ago. He let go of my hand only to pull back the comforter and sit on the edge of the mattress. "I don't want to be by myself tonight," he said. The words were direct, but his voice frayed at the ends. "Then don't be." I answered too fast. He looked up, eyes tired and too clear in the low light. "I'm asking you to stay." The room went still around that sentence. Even the traffic outside seemed farther away. I could feel the worn grain of the doorframe under my fingertips where I'd stopped myself from moving any closer. He patted the space beside him once, not playful, not casual, just certain. "Not on the couch. Here." I crossed the room before I could talk myself out of it. The mattress dipped under my weight. We sat shoulder to shoulder first, both of us facing the dark window like there was something written out there that could make this easier. Darius inhaled, shaky and slow, then leaned until his temple rested against my shoulder. The contact was light at first, almost careful. I stayed perfectly still. After a few seconds he shifted closer, his hand catching in the fabric near my elbow as if he needed something solid to hold. "You always make everything manageable," he murmured. "Even when I'm making a mess of it." "That's not a talent," I said. "That's just me cleaning up after you." His breath hitched into the smallest laugh, warm through my shirt. "Stay anyway." I turned then, enough to see his face in the dimness, enough to know he wasn't asking out of habit. He had come apart in this apartment, and now he was choosing me while all the pieces were still visible. I reached for the lamp and clicked it off. Darkness folded softer around us, blue from the window and cool against my skin. "I'm here," I said. My voice sounded different in the dark. Darius exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for hours, then lay back and tugged me down with him. Not into anything reckless, just near, just real, our shoulders pressed together beneath the comforter while the city flickered across the ceiling. After a long silence, his fingers found my wrist under the blanket and stayed there. "Don't go when I fall asleep," he whispered. I stared into the dark and felt the shape of my life shifting under that single request. "I won't," I said, and this time I meant more than the night. Morning light came in thin and gray through the blinds, striping the bed and the wall with bars of cold silver. The radiator hissed once, then settled, and somewhere out on the street a delivery truck backed up with a flat mechanical beep that did not belong in a room this quiet. Darius's hand was still wrapped loosely around my wrist under the blanket when I opened my eyes. Not gripping, just there, warm and asleep, like even unconscious he had decided I was the thing to hold on to. I lay still for a second too long, letting that fact settle where it shouldn't have, then carefully eased my arm free. The mattress shifted. Darius made a low sound in his throat and reached across the empty space before his eyes even opened. "Malik, I'm here." His face relaxed again before he fully woke, and that almost did me in more than anything from the night before. I stood, tugged the comforter back over his shoulder, and crossed the cold floorboards to the window. The city outside looked washed out after rain, rooftop puddles catching pale light, steam lifting from a vent across the alley. Behind me, sheets rustled. Don't do that, he muttered. I turned. He was propped on one elbow, hair flattened on one side, jaw shadowed from a bad night, and no sleep worth mentioning. Do what? Vanish to the other side of the room like you're trying to make this less weird by adding distance. His voice was rough, but there was a crooked edge to it now, something almost lighter. I leaned against the windowsill and folded my arms. You notice distance this fast? I notice everything with you. The words landed before either of us could soften them. He sat up slowly, blanket gathered around his waist, and looked at me in that open, unguarded way that never lasted long enough. Stay for coffee, he said. That's not exactly a bold ask, I said. No, he answered. So don't make me work for it. The kitchen smelled like grounds and toasted bread 20 minutes later, warmer now with sunlight touching the counter edges and the blue mug he always used. Darius moved around me like the room had been rearranged overnight, and we were both learning the new layout by instinct. He bumped my hip with his when he reached for the sugar. He stole a slice of toast off my plate and ate it standing too close. When I rinsed a spoon, he dried it and set it away before I could reach for the dish rack. Tiny things. Stupid things. The kind of things that could build a cathedral inside a man if he wasn't careful. By noon, he was following me through the apartment without pretending otherwise. He sat on the arm of the couch while I answered emails from work, socked foot nudging my knee every few minutes. He asked what I wanted for lunch, then ignored my answer and ordered from the Thai place I liked anyway, claiming he already knew better. The smell of basil and chili filled the living room when it arrived, sharp and bright, and he handed me the carton without making a joke about how predictable I was. That scared me more than if he had. It kept going. In the afternoon, he took a phone call from his sister in the hallway, voice low, and when he came back, he dropped onto the couch beside me, so close our shoulders knocked. You leaving tonight? He asked, staring at the muted TV neither of us was watching. Leaving for where? Anywhere. His fingers drummed once against his thigh, then stopped. You usually disappear when things get messy. Go for a run. Hide in errands. Clean something that doesn't need cleaning. You make me sound domestic in a tragic way. You are domestic in a tragic way. I laughed despite myself. He looked at me then, really looked, and the laugh died quietly between us. Stay in tonight, he said. Again. Hope is dangerous mostly because it arrives wearing ordinary clothes. It looked like takeout cartons on the coffee table, his sock brushing mine under a blanket by evening, the amber glow of the lamp turning his skin warmer than the winter light had. It looked like Darius pausing in the doorway of my room after grabbing a sweatshirt from the dryer and asking, You coming? As if my place was now wherever he was. So I followed. We ate ice cream from the carton on his bed and watched half a terrible action movie on his laptop, blue screen light flickering over his cheekbones, his laugh low and sudden every time the dialogue got worse. At one point his head tipped to my shoulder like it had done it 100 times. At another, he took my hand to inspect a tiny burn mark near my thumb from the skillet and kept holding it a beat too long before letting go. Every small kindness opened something in me I had spent years boarding shut. And still, when the credits rolled and the room went dim except for the city glow at the blinds, he stretched out on his back and said softly, almost to himself, I forgot what it's like not to feel alone. Then, after a pause that chilled the room more than the draft at the window, he added, I don't know what I would have done without you this week. This week. The words sat between us like a measured dose. Temporary. Crisis-shaped. I stared at the ceiling while the old building creaked around us and understood, all at once, how easy it would be to mistake being needed for being chosen. By the third night, the apartment had started to learn his footsteps again. The old floor near Darius's bedroom gave one short creak before the hallway opened into the living room, and I heard it while standing at the stove with a wooden spoon in one hand and steam fogging the cabinet above me. Onion and black pepper hung in the warm air. Rain tapped softly at the kitchen window. That smells illegal, Darius said behind me. I didn't jump, but only because I'd gotten too used to him appearing at my shoulder now. He reached past me for a glass, his forearm brushing mine, cool skin against the heat rising off the pan. You making enough for two? I made enough for a grown man who hovers and critiques. So yes. He smiled, and for a minute it almost let me forget the sentence from the night before, the one that had turned everything back into triage in my head. We ate at the counter with the under-cabinet light turned on low, the rest of the apartment dim and bluish from the weather. Darius talked more than he had in days. Not about Ryan. Not about the breakup. About a coworker who had sent an email with the wrong attachment to the whole office. About a guy on the subway wearing a winter scarf in team colors so ugly it looked aggressive. About anything easy enough to keep his hands moving and his eyes off me whenever the silence threatened to deepen. I let him do it. I even laughed in the right places. But every time his knee touched mine under the counter, a hard thought came back and sat down beside me. He wanted the warmth, not the fire source. After dinner, he tossed me the dish towel and said, "Movie in my room," like it was already decided. I dried my hands slowly, listening to the faucet drip once, twice, into the metal sink. Not tonight. He leaned one hip against the counter. "You busy?" "No, then what?" The apartment seemed suddenly full of sounds too small to matter. The vent rattling above the fridge, the rain dragging against the glass, the distant siren from 6 blocks over. I folded the towel into a square because if I kept my hands moving, maybe I wouldn't say something reckless. "I think you should have the room to be by yourself tonight." His expression changed so quickly it was almost invisible, like a light passing behind cloud cover. "That what you think?" "Yeah." He gave a short laugh with no humor in it. Funny timing. I set the towel down. "Darius." "No, really. That's great." He pushed away from the counter and crossed to the living room, not storming off, not slamming anything, just moving with a clipped force that made me follow. The lamp beside the couch threw a dull amber circle over the rug. His phone lit up on the coffee table with a silent notification and went dark again. He stood by the window, arms folded, city reflections breaking across the glass over his face. 3 days, he said. 3 days of you staying, sleeping next to me, letting me think maybe we were finally being honest, and now you decide I need space." I didn't say space. "Then say what you mean." That was the problem. I could say too much. I could say all of it. The room smelled faintly of detergent from the load I'd forgotten in the dryer and the leftover spice from dinner, ordinary smells for an unordinary moment. I kept my voice low anyway. "You came to me wrecked. I stayed. I wanted to stay. But if this is just because being alone hurts right now, I need to know before I build something out of it that isn't there." He stared at me, not blinking. "Build something." "You heard me." "No, I did. I'm just trying to figure out when you started turning every good thing between us into an exit strategy." The words hit harder because he didn't throw them. He stood there steady, looking at me as if he had finally gotten tired of me slipping through his hands. I felt my jaw tighten. "And I'm trying to figure out whether you want me or just the version of me that shows up with food and a pulse when somebody else leaves." Silence. Pure, stretched, dangerous. Rain ran down the glass in silver threads. Darius's throat moved once. Then he nodded like he'd been handed something sharp and decided to hold it anyway. "So that's what you think I'm doing. I think neither of us gets to pretend this is simple anymore." He looked down at the phone on the coffee table, then picked it up. For one wild second I thought he might call Ryan. Prove me right in the ugliest way possible. Instead, he grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door. Metal clicked against metal. "Fine," he said, voice flat now. "You want honesty? Here's some. I can't hear myself think with you standing there deciding what I mean before I do." He shoved his feet into sneakers without sitting down, yanked open the apartment door, and cold hallway air rushed in, dry and sharp against my face. I took one step forward. "Darius." He looked back at me, hands still on the knob, eyes bright with something he wasn't giving words to yet. "You don't get to ask me to stay," he said, "and then be the first one to leave." Then he walked out, and the door shut hard enough to rattle the picture frame by the entryway, leaving me alone with the rain, the cooling apartment, and the sound of my own mistakes settling into every room. Rain kept ticking against the windows long after the door slammed, a thin, hard sound that made the whole apartment feel smaller. The lamp by the couch threw a tired yellow circle over the coffee table, over the half-full glass of water Darius had left behind, over the blanket still folded where he had slept badly the night before. I stood in the entryway until the chill from the cracked door found my ankles, then grabbed my keys before I could talk myself out of it. Outside, the hallway smelled like old paint and damp carpet. By the time I hit the street, the rain had softened to mist, cold enough to cling to my lashes. Darius wasn't far. He was standing at the corner under the flickering pharmacy sign with both hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, shoulders locked tight, like he was holding himself together by force. I stopped a few feet away. Traffic hissed over wet asphalt behind him. You can't throw that at me and disappear, I said. He let out a laugh with no warmth in it, and looked up at the red glow from the sign instead of at me. You already disappeared, he said. You were still there, but you were gone. A bus roared past, pushing a gust of diesel-scented air between us. I stepped closer, because I didn't know what I was to you anymore. That made him look at me. Rain had darkened his hair at the temples, and the scraped knuckle on his right hand had opened again, a thin line of red against pale skin. You were the one person I thought I didn't have to second-guess, he said. Then you started acting like every time I asked for you, I was taking something I wasn't allowed to have. The words landed harder than the cold. I reached for his hand on instinct, then stopped halfway. He saw that too. His jaw tightened. See, he said quietly. That. For a second, neither of us moved. A cab splashed through the gutter. Somewhere down the block a siren rose and fell. Then I pulled off my jacket and held it out. Come back inside, I said. You're freezing. He stared at the jacket like it was the wrong answer on purpose. I'm not coming back in there just to have you look at me like I'm a problem you're trying not to touch. The pharmacy sign buzzed overhead. My fingers curled tighter around the damp fabric. Then tell me what to do. He swallowed, eyes shining under the streetlight, not from rain this time. I don't know, he said, and that was the first honest thing in the conversation that didn't sound like an accusation. I nodded once, because I didn't know either. Then I did the only thing that felt clean. I set my keys in his palm and closed his fingers over them. The metal clicked softly against his ring. Take the apartment tonight, I said. Lock up, sleep, yell at me tomorrow if you want. I'm going to Marcus's. His head snapped up. What? You said I was the first one to leave. My voice came out low and rough. So I'm fixing that. I'm not asking you to stand outside in the rain and drag this out while neither of us knows how to say it right. His hand opened around the keys, water shining in the lines of his skin. Malik. No, I said, shaking my head. You don't get to lean on me because it hurts and then punish me because I noticed it hurts. If you come back tomorrow and what you need is your roommate again, I can do that. I'll do it. But if that's not what this is anymore, then you need to stop reaching for me like I'm only here for the worst week of your life. The words shook on the way out, but they stayed standing once they were in the air. Darius looked at the keys, then at me, like I had handed him something heavier than metal. The rain slicked the sidewalk black around our shoes. You'd really leave? He asked. Tonight? Yeah. My throat burned. For good? That depends on what you do with this. I pressed his hand closed again around the keys, then stepped back before he could return them. For once I was the one walking away first on purpose, shoes splashing through shallow water, heart pounding so hard it seemed to knock against the cold. I made it half a block before I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. Not because I didn't want to. Because if he wanted me, he would have to cross the distance himself. The hum of a vending machine filled the quiet lobby at Marcus's building, bright and sterile under fluorescent lights that flattened every color. My coffee had gone cold 20 minutes earlier, and the paper cup felt soft where my grip had crushed it. Marcus had given me his couch, a thin gray blanket, and one long look that said he knew better than to ask questions at 1 a.m., but sleep never came. By morning the rain had burned off, leaving the city washed clean and too sharp. Sunlight bounced off windshields in the parking lot outside, and my phone sat dark on my knee like a dare. No messages. No missed calls. I told myself that was good. It proved nothing had changed without words. It proved I had done the right thing. At 9:14, the screen lit up. Not a text. Darius's name. The ring cut through the lobby, so suddenly my hand jerked. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Yeah. On the other end I heard traffic, wind, and his breathing before I heard his voice. Marcus told me you were downstairs. I sat up straight. You talked to Marcus? He opened the door, looked at me for half a second, and decided I was too pathetic to lie to. There was a faint scrape, like Darius shifting his weight against brick. Come outside. Heat rushed through me so fast it felt like anger. You could have texted. You might have ignored that. He wasn't wrong. I pushed through the glass doors into dry morning air that still held a trace of wet pavement and gasoline. Darius was across the street by a row of mailboxes, sunglasses hanging from the collar of his t-shirt. Malik's. My. Keys looped around one finger. He looked like he hadn't slept. The scrape on his knuckle had been cleaned and covered with a bandage. When I crossed to him, He held the keys out. I didn't take them. Did you stay there? I asked. For a while. His eyes stayed on mine this time. No evasive glance, no soft landing. Then I left. Why? He looked at the keys in his hand and gave a small, humorless shake of his head. Because I walked in and the place felt wrong without you in it. The couch still had that stupid dent on your side. Your mug was in the sink. Your charger was hanging by the outlet under the table. His thumb rubbed over the key ring. I kept thinking I just needed to calm down, that I was reacting because everything already hurt. But it wasn't that. A truck rattled by, making the metal mailbox doors buzz. I folded my arms tight, less to protect myself than to keep from reaching for him too soon. Then what was it? Darius exhaled and stepped off the curb toward me, one careful pace like he was crossing onto unstable ground. When my ex left, I thought the thing wrecking me was losing him. And some of it was. But last night, when you walked away, that was different. The morning sun hit the side of his face, showing the fatigue under his eyes, the rough shave he hadn't fixed. I could stand there and tell myself you were being dramatic, or scared, or unfair. Didn't matter. The only thing I could think was that the apartment wasn't home if you weren't in it. My throat went tight. He swallowed and kept going before I could stop him. I'm not here because I need someone to get me through being dumped. I'm here because the part that knocked the air out of me wasn't losing the person I used to sleep next to. It was realizing I might lose the person I turned toward first. The keys pressed into his palm hard enough to leave marks. And I know that still doesn't answer everything. I know I've been confused and selfish and late. He took another step until only a foot of sun-warmed sidewalk sat between us. But what I want is not old comfort. It's you. I don't fully have the language for all of it yet, and I'm done pretending that means it isn't real. The city kept moving around us, car doors shutting, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the smell of toasted bread drifting from a corner deli, and for once none of it softened what he'd said. It just gave it a place to land. I looked at the keys in his hand, then finally reached out, not for the metal, but for his wrist. His pulse jumped under my fingers. Say that again, I said quietly. Darius's mouth trembled at one corner, almost a smile, almost fear. Come home with me, he said. Not because I can't be alone. Because I don't want to keep pretending you're anything less than the person I want there. Warm air drifted out of the corner deli each time the door opened, carrying the smell of coffee and toasted bread into the bright, late morning. A delivery truck beeped as it backed into the alley, and somewhere above us an air conditioner rattled in a window frame. Darius still had the keys between his fingers, and I still had my hand around his wrist. Neither of us moved for a beat, like the whole street had gone waiting with us. Then I let out the breath I'd been holding since last night. If I come back, I said, I'm not coming back to be your soft place while you figure out whether you miss someone else. He nodded immediately, once hard. I know. I mean it. My thumb pressed against the inside of his wrist, feeling his pulse answer me. No more reaching for me in the dark and acting like it means less in the daylight. The corner of his mouth tightened, not in offense, but like the truth stung because it fit. You won't have to. He turned his hand and slid the keys into my palm, then closed my fingers around them with both of his. His hands were warm from the sun. I was wrong about what this was. Maybe not all at once, maybe not gracefully, but I was wrong. I kept trying to separate needing you from wanting you, because that felt safer. His eyes held mine without slipping away. It stopped being true a long time ago. Streetlight glare flashed off a passing windshield and broke over his face. I searched him for hesitation and found exhaustion, honesty, and the last of something he had finally dropped. That was enough to make me tell the truth back. I didn't pull away because I wanted less, I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. I pulled away because I wanted too much, and I couldn't survive being your almost. The words settled between us, simple and irreversible. Darius went still, not startled exactly, more like a lock clicking open after pressure had been on it for years. Too much, he repeated, and there was the faintest rough laugh under it, disbelieving and relieved at the same time. Malik. Yeah, you could have told me. I looked down at our hands, at his bandaged knuckle against my skin, at the keys trapped between us like the shape of every door in this story. You were straight, I said. You were dating people who weren't me. You were my roommate. Pick one. He huffed out a breath, then stepped in close enough that the sounds of the block blurred around the edges. I did think I was straight, he said. Or maybe I thought if I never looked too hard at this, I'd never have to ask harder questions. He gave a tiny shake of his head. But nobody else ever felt like home in the way you do. Nobody else ever got under my skin just by moving 3 feet farther away on a couch. My laugh escaped before I could stop it, small and wrecked and real. That seemed to steady him. He lifted one hand to my shoulder, slow enough to give me room to stop him, and when I didn't, his grip settled there, firm, careful, certain. "Come back with me," he said again. "Not to reset. Not to pretend we can slide into yesterday. Come back so we can do this honestly. If that means slow, fine. If that means awkward, also fine. But I want you with me because I want you with me." The sun had climbed high enough to warm the brick wall at my back. A breeze lifted the edge of his shirt. Behind him, the city kept insisting on ordinary life. Crosswalk chirps, a woman laughing into her phone, the metallic clatter of someone dropping a stack of pans in a restaurant kitchen, and somehow that made the moment feel more solid, not less. I turned the keys over in my hand. Last night they had meant distance, a test, a line I couldn't keep erasing for him. Now they meant something else. Not shelter. Choice. I caught the front of his shirt lightly in my fist and drew him the final inch closer until his forehead brushed mine. "I'm coming back," I said, "but I'm not staying because you're hurting." His breath warmed my cheek. "Why then?" This time I didn't hide behind timing or caution or the old rules of our apartment. "Because I'm in love with you," I said, and the world did not crack open. It simply became easier to stand in. His eyes closed for one brief second, like he had been hit by something gentle and enormous. When he opened them again, they were bright and steady. "Then stay," he whispered. "For that." We went back together with our shoulders knocking once on the walk and neither of us apologizing. Inside the apartment, the air still held last night's cooled rain and the faint clean scent of laundry soap from the blanket on the couch. Darius set his phone on the counter, took the glass from the coffee table to the sink, and opened the blinds wider until sunlight filled the room that had felt abandoned only hours before. No grand speech. No dramatic rescue. Just both of us there, changing the shape of the place by choosing it at the same time. When he came back to me by the window, he reached for my hand like he had every right to learn it now instead of guessing. I laced our fingers together and stayed, not as the space between his heartbreak and whatever came next, but as what came next itself.